Hey, this is Seption, back for the second of my Warboss Tae 2021 Summer Painting Challenge, side quest, video tutorial, whatevers. This time we're going to be looking at painting the base. We're going to go for kind of a blasted, snowy wasteland winter base sort of theme. We'll be using the same model that we did a minor weapon swap in the last video, this Vampire Lord from Games Workshop. The paints I'm going to be using are Games Workshop, Abaddon Black, Vallejo Game Colors, Heavy Charcoal Gray, Somber Gray, Wolf Gray, and the Games Workshop non-oil shade. Any blacks, grays, and black wash or black ink will pretty much do for this. It's not very particular about the colors you use. And when we're done, we'll also be applying some of this Games Workshop Valhalla Blizzard snow effect. Although, again, any snow effect will do, and honestly, I mean, I'm still using this, but I'm not super happy with it. So if you find a different snow effect, you know, that might be worth your time. All right. Let's move these back. This is going to involve a lot of kind of sloppy painting, some dry brushing. So I wouldn't recommend using your best brushes necessarily. Find some kind of cheap synthetic brush to work with. That's also why I tend to paint the bases first on my models, and then kind of be careful about painting the model around it. Alternatively, you can paint the base and the models separately, but I generally don't do that. I don't bother with that. Let's see. Basically, this way we can be messy with the base, and if we get some paint on the model, that doesn't matter. We'll paint over it later. And if we mess up the base a bit while painting the model, that doesn't matter too much, because again, we'll have that snow effect at the end that we can use to cover up mistakes. So we don't even have to worry too much about that. Let's just... So we want to start with kind of a black undercoat here. And you really want it to get in all that... get in all the rough texture, the slate we used, the cork. So we really do want to water this down pretty good. It doesn't need to be a solid black here. Just needs to get in all the recesses and give us a base to work with. So let me... Yeah, I'm still not used to working with the camera here. I apologize if it's a bit jittery from me bumping it. So... Oh, and I didn't talk about this earlier, but since you've seen this model last, we have primed it. For priming, I used a black primer, and then I went over it with a black undercoat, just to try and get in the crevices and everything. And then we went for a zenithal highlight with a light gray. I think I used one of the Games Workshop Citadel whiter or gray sprays. I forget which one exactly. Probably Gray Seer. And that was mostly just so that I can see what I'm doing as I'm working on it. Just a plain black matte undercoat, it can be hard to see the details yourself when you're trying to figure out what you're painting. You can use the same method with like contrast paints or like glazes and washes to kind of be the highlights, like to set the highlights and shadows for your model. We're going to be painting it pretty normally, so most of this is going to get painted over, but some of it will show through. Like you want that black to start so that like cracks and crevices that you can't reach are still shadowed. You don't have like, if you just started with a white primer, you don't have the white peeking back out at you anywhere that you can't reach. And also you still get the lighter undercoat for a lot of like the top surfaces, like around the hair and the face here, which matters if you're going to be painting brighter colors or lighter colors on anything, because those can be a pain to get down over a black undercoat. And we will be doing some lighter colors, particularly with the face and the hair on this model. So yeah, even if you're not doing the contrast paint thing or the fancy airbrushing thing or painting just with inks and glazes where your undercoat establishes the highlights and shadows of the finished product as well, even so, I still like the black undercoat and then the zenithal white spray. And I did prime and spray the shield separately from the model. I had intended to paint it separately, but I just glued it on after getting the sprays on. It'll be fine. All right, so that is pretty good there. It is very watered down, so we're going to leave that to dry for a minute before we move on to our next color. But you can already see where, I'm getting paint on the model, but that doesn't matter because we'll paint it later, so it is just kind of saving us some time. Alright. Back in a few minutes. Alright, that's the black undercoat on. The next color is going to be this Vallejo Game Color Heavy Charcoal Gray. Any really dark, almost black gray will do here. Eschen Gray maybe on the lighter end, Corvus Gray, that sort of thing. Let me just get a bit of that out. And ready for really just an all-over base coat. Water it down a bit so it can get kind of into the grit and gristle, but if some of the black is showing through, that's fine. Later on, there'll be the black wash to kind of get the recesses darker again. All right. Leave that to dry, and we'll be back for the next step. All right, so the base coat, dark gray, is dry. Next up will be kind of a overbrush or heavy dry brush of a mid-tone gray. I'm using Vallejo Game Color Somber Gray. It's a little bit purplish. You might prefer a more neutral gray like Games Workshop's Mechanicus. But any kind of mid-tone gray should work here. So we're going to get some of this, kind of wipe it off a bit on our cloth, not too much, and leaving most of it on the brush. And just kind of heavily brush that over all of the stone and gravel work on the base. We want to leave a lot of our dark gray base coat showing through. But we also want to get a fair bit of this on here. This is hard on your brush. I use kind of a cheaper synthetic for this stuff. I like kind of a flat or kind of square head brush. One of these kind of flat angled brushes. So I can get into bits. But still get a nice wide surface there. Alright, that goes pretty quick. And you can see how painting it all the same way kind of brings together the slate and the kind of fine slate gravel and the texture paint and the corkboard kind of like makes it all sort of coherent. All right. Let's see here. This is dry brushing. It's already pretty dry, so we don't even need to wait around for that very much. Our next step is going to be a lighter dry brush of kind of a paler gray. I'm using this wolf gray. It's the same gray I used to base coat kind of like ghostly green areas. So to tie the tones together a little bit. That's more than I needed. Oh well. This is a lot lighter than our neutral gray, so I might even mix in a little bit. Yeah, there we go. And this will be a lighter dry brush, so we're going to wipe off more of the paint. Okay. And we want to focus more on kind of the raised edges, the more sharper textures. Especially pick out like kind of these corner bits. You can see once we get to the dry brushing, stuff starts going pretty quickly, which is nice. Yeah, now let's get just some of this wolf gray by itself. And we're going to focus on just the sharpest edges. All right. That's pretty good. And you could really just call it here. But we are going to take it a little bit further, do some washing to bring back in some shadows and some darker areas. I do like to use the same brush cleaner everybody uses, it seems like. And it's obviously critical for your nice, fancy sable hair detail brush whatevers if you've got them, but it'll keep the synthetics nice too. All right. So next up, just going to be a wash of this Nuln Oil. Any black wash will do. If you'd like to work some like sort of tonal color variation, you might do some other wash either before or after the black wash, depending on whether you want it to be a little bit weaker or stronger respectively. Let's see. Do I have anything to do like an example of that? You might add some brown washes or some green if you want to get some moss effect. Maybe some blue. Let's see here. Here. I've got some ancient Citadel blue wash. Let's actually use a bit of this to give an example of that. I don't want this to be too strong. I don't want it to look too different from my other bases, so I'm going to dilute it with some Lamian medium here. Boop, boop. Ooh. Still too strong. There we go. That's what I'm looking for. So let's help this hero guy stand out a bit, or girl rather. I guess this model's a bit ambiguous, you could call them either way. Alright. So I'm just going to add a bit of blue tint just to these kind of larger slate pieces. Right. Let that dry and come back for the black wash. Okay, so our blue is dry. Again, that's an entirely optional step just to get a little bit of tone in there, and you could use a brown or a green or just skip it entirely. Next, we're going to do a bit of a black wash to add a little bit more depth back in. As with the blue wash, I'm going to dilute it, this time not quite as much, about 50-50 with some medium, just because I don't want to make the whole thing very dark. So we're going to dilute it a bit and focus to some areas that we kind of want shaded down a bit more. Before that, a little bit of a PSA. This is my Raphael #1 Fancy Sable. It used to be my, well, it still is my favorite brush. It used to be my kind of do-everything brush. It held a lot of paint, and it came to a really nice point, and I knew not to use it for, things like dry brushing and to, rinse it out frequently and wash it with the brush soap. One thing that I didn't know when I first got one of these was you really shouldn't use it with shades or inks or contrast paints or anything else that's designed to kind of run into the cracks and crevices of your model. Those things work with ingredients that kind of break up the surface tension, and just like it'll run into the cracks and crevices of the model, it will run up right between the bristles of your brush and get into the what's the ferrule, the metal bit here that holds the brush together. And once that happens, like the point will never be the same after that. So this brush still holds a nice amount of paint, still really nice and easy to work with, but that really nice point that I could also do like detail work with it, that's just gone. So now this is my wash brush, and it's a very nice wash brush, but I do not recommend you use this kind of brush for washes. Be smarter than me and use, the cheaper synthetics for that job. All right. Okay. Like I said, mix about 50-50 with the medium, and we are just gonna kind of focus on some areas that we want to get a bit more shadow into. And we might use some undiluted black wash for some kind of particularly darker or recessed areas. or to get in with some of this kind of grit stuff. Some of the small slate chips. Sorry about bumping the camera. Still not used to working with that thing. Boop, boop, boop. So, yeah. And if you're using like a bit of color to add a bit of tone, like I did with the blue on this model, you could do those kind of washes before or after the black wash. If you do them before like I did, it'll be a bit less strong because the black wash will somewhat cover it up. So if you want it to be stronger, just save that for after. Alright. And we don't need too much of this really. Don't let it pool up too much. Alright. Okay, so that's about what I'm looking for here. And we'll leave that to dry and take a look at it later. Take a look at that after that dries. Alright. Alright, we're back. The black wash is not yet dry, but while that's drying, we can save some time by painting the rim of the base. I'm just going to paint that with some Abaddon black. So try and be careful not to get any of the slightly overhanging bits of slate. And back to the exciting business of watching paint dry. Okay, we're back. And as you can see, that dried in pretty well. Once again, we've reached a point where you could just kind of call it done. But the washes have brought down that top highlight just enough that I want to bring it back with a little bit more of a dry brush. So once again, I'll be using the Wolf Gray. You can use an Ulthuan Gray, Gray Seer, any kind of near white, pale gray. This time I'll be using one of these more kind of fancier dedicated dry brush things. Kind of makeup brush style. The reason I didn't do this earlier was because like even this smaller one that I have doesn't quite fit everywhere I wanted to get to. And we were going on like a little bit heavier, so we didn't need something quite so dainty. And again, we're just focusing on sharper areas Just bring back a little bit. A little bit of that top highlight. And there we go. That is it for painting the rocky surfaces of this base. We still want to do some of the snow effect, but that'll be after the rest of the model is painted and we got the spray varnish on it. So I might show off some of that, but with a different model than this one. So we'll be back in a bit. Okay, so once again, this is our in progress Vampire Lord. The base is pretty much painted, but has to wait for the rest of the model to be painted and varnished for the snow effect. So for the purpose of this tutorial video, we'll be doing snow effect on this Emerald Life Swarm model. It is painted and varnished and ready for some snow effect to finish it off. I use Games Workshop Valhalla and Blizzard because it's easy and available, but admittedly the effect isn't necessarily the best, particularly if you're looking for like fluffy snow. If you want fluffy snow, you probably want, you can mix baking soda with some PVA glue, water, and some white paint, and slather that onto the base, and then kind of dust some PVA or some baking soda on top of that. I've done that before, and it gets you a nice fluffy snow, and it's certainly cheap to do, but it's a bit of a hassle. So I like this lazy, straight out of the box business. I also use these little Games Workshop texture paint applicator business. It's basically just a little spatula. I find it works better for their texture paints than trying to brush them on. So you just get a dollop of your snow effect on, pick a spot, and kind of smush it into a bit of a pile. Oh, sometimes you get these dried bits. We're just gonna get rid of that. Boop. And I like kind of patchy style, just put some here and there. You can push it around pretty well with this applicator business. If you drag it out like that at the edges, you get kind of a somewhat transparent melty effect. Let's push some right up against the skull here. And you can cover as much or as little of the base as you want. If you want to build it up pretty deep though, like deeper than this, then I would recommend doing so in layers, like letting it dry completely and then build up some more after that. And you might want to do that anyway, just because it can develop kind of a weird sort of pocked or bubbled texture as it dries. I don't know if it's because I'm getting air bubbles in under the effect from the texture base, or if that's just what it always does. I don't mind it. Looks a little bit like you've had some sort of freezing rain going on. But if you don't, then building up a couple layers seems to help with that. And so yeah, you just put some down, patchy style. And we'll see how that dries. All right, and we've left the snow effect overnight to set fully so that you can see what it actually looks like when it dries, because it generally looks a little bit better when you're just putting it on than when it's actually set. And you can see, like what I was talking about in terms of the kind of hole showing up in the pockmarked surface. I'm not sure if that is something I'm doing wrong applying it. Like I said, I don't mind the look of it so much, so I'm just kind of cool leaving it like that. If you want to avoid that some, you can apply kind of a second layer, generally helps with that, which is partially why I say if you want to build up kind of thicker snow, then apply it in multiple layers, let each one fully set. Or you can use other snow methods. I mean, this is kind of easy, but it's not necessarily the best. But that's what I use. Like I said, I don't mind. It gives kind of like a frozen rain sort of look to it. And that's how I do my kind of winter wasteland bases. If you have any suggestions for me, I mean, I'm no expert on any of this stuff. If you have ways you think it could be done better, please let me know. Otherwise, I will see you for the next video.